Hello, I'm Malcolm Hazlitt. Bringing up children is never easy and can be affected by many circumstances, including the country you're raised in and maybe if you can't stay with your birth parents for whatever reason. And what can be done with dilapidated or eyesore stovey poles. That's hard to get out in one breath. More coming up next on Our Time. Well, our very special guests do the most incredibly different things. And my first guest is John Masri. John, you have such an interesting upbringing because you were born here in Australia. Oh, now, first of all, we can't go past talking about this wonderful moustache and beard.
Oh, thanks, Malcolm. Yeah, I've been growing it for a character, and so far so good. So
because you do some acting on the side.
Yes, or we work with plays and such. So that also is an element of my life, I guess.
Another part of your life. But
yes.
What we're really talking about is you were born here in Australia, weren't you?
Yes, I was born in Oruru, a small town a bit from here, yeah.
And what happened next?
Well, 10 weeks later, I was in Beirut, in Lebanon.
So your parents, why did they go there?
So my mum actually met my dad there. She worked with Youth with a Mission and was on a mission there for 4 months where they met, and that was in 91. And a year later,
fell in love.
It's the moment when you say, and then history.
And yes, okay.
And then they decided to have me here.
So that you would be an Australian citizen.
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Then went back to Lebanon.
Right, so my dad came out here when I was born for a bit, and then we moved back. And I've grown up there. I have visited here every maybe 4 or 2 years. We'd come back and forth. But in general, I've grown up my whole life there.
So you've grown up in a country that's basically war-torn. How's that affected you?
It's interesting. The thing about conflict, whether it's active or just passive, between ceasefires, it's more subtle. It's that acknowledgement of what you can and can't do based where you are. It's tension. It's just always there. It's not as debilitating as you feel, but it does affect you.
Well, it must. As a little boy, though, could you go out of the home? Could you go play with your friends? Could you leave sort of an enclave?
Yeah, I had friends. We'd hang out in the neighborhood together, or we do many activities. It doesn't feel that different. The difference is only when it starts rising up. So, for example, in 2006, we had the Israeli conflict, and that when it was active war, which was for 30 days, and you have bombings every day, and you try to things shut down, and it's always building. You think of movies, and it's always this explosion of anger and violence. It's never that. It's a tidal wave you can see, and what happens is, as the violence increases and more people are lost, that's the thing you think about as a child. And we were old enough. I was 11. I was old enough to know what was happening and why, but not necessarily to process it as the scale that it was.
But this is sort of a reality to you because you're living in it. I mean, it's the reality we see in the movies, but here in this country, we've never been in this position. Children have never been in this position as such. I mean, they might be in warring families as such, but not in a warring country. Did it give you a different attitude towards life and being alive?
I think so. It can, in a good or bad way, it can mature you. And this is not to say I'm a mature man, but...
Well, you are, really. You have a wonderful moustache and beard to prove it. But no, more I mean, do you just believe that life is like this everywhere? Does that make sense? This is what living on the planet is. There's conflict and then there's a ceasefire or there's...
I think when I was much younger, I genuinely felt that I know from books or media, I know that it's not the same everywhere. But admittedly, when I was maybe 10, you have that, it's that feeling of injustice. It wasn't fair.
So you could feel that as a child?
I felt that why was this happening here? And then you get into big questions about conflict and war and anything you want to get into. But the general feeling was I understood that this wasn't how it should be. Does that make sense?
Yes,
it's not right.
That makes perfect sense.
And any child can tell you that in any conflicts, whether war or domestic violence, they know that this isn't normal on a level.
Right. I guess that's part of the purpose for chatting with you as to how you've overcome that to now come back to Australia and
Right.
the sort of peaceful nation that we actually are.
Yeah.
How do you feel, going from that upbringing to no conflict, that you can just walk out in the street, do whatever you want to do?
I mean, to be fair, we could do that, but I guess it's that it's more casual here, and I know that's a very soft word, but it really is. Your problems here seem bigger than they are compared to the context
Of being able to be shot when you walk out your house. Yes.
Yeah, it's that sense of scale for what considers something to be horrible or something to just be an everyday problem.
Did you see it as a horrible everyday problem, or just this is life?
It was the normal. It was the standard. I didn't have anything to compare it to. I didn't live somewhere
So how
else.
did your parents cope with this, knowing that they were taking their child back into a war-torn country?
It's interesting. So, my parents were strong with it. We did not see conflict directly as children.
Right, they kept you away.
Yeah, it's more
separated.
about teaching that wisdom of to be aware of what's going on.
Right.
I could still walk around and do whatever with my friends. It's just some areas are safer than others.
But also, you knew if this happened, I need to get home. Was it that sort of feeling?
Yeah, there's always a safety net with parents.
Safety
They can
net.
always teach that you know what to do if something does go wrong.
So you're back in Australia and you're back at uni, is
Right,
that right? And you're
yes.
studying,
Media arts.
okay, with the plan to be,
Well, if we're talking a dream job, probably a producer or at least a writer on a show would be great.
right. And do you feel your experiences from what you've grown up with are going to affect where you're going to go with this?
I think
Have
so.
you got stories in your head? Have you got ideas of what you would like the public to see? Do you want to recreate what you've been brought up with, or do you want to show a better world? What do you feel?
I want to translate that emotional growth into either a story or film. That's something I would like to do, to translate what that can change with someone, how that can change them.
I did ask you before about the tats on your arm.
Right.
You said there's only one that really relates to being there. Can you just
Yes.
explain that?
So these two arms interlocking. My friends and I, when we were part of the revolution, which was last year in October, we used to line up and link arms in front of the military police as part of the protests.
So you were how old then?
This was last year, so I was 24,
24, right.
or turned 25 recently, so
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is a recent. I find this so hard to grasp that you're in this country and you were doing this, and there's people with guns on the other side, and they weren't allowed to shoot at you because you did this.
We're civilians, yeah. They're not allowed to. We were also peacefully protesting, and that's something that's difficult.
You know, in the world at the moment, there's peaceful protests and that people are being shot. So it's
right.
so it's just to try and understand how this will affect you long term, I guess.
I don't know.
It's just your life, isn't it?
Right. It affects everyone differently, and I think some can integrate it into their character, and some people, unfortunately, it does give them those mental effects, and you could name any number of them at that point.
Were you ever tempted as a young man growing up with perhaps anger against the violence to join one side or the other?
No,
Was there pressure on you for that?
I didn't feel that. It was through good education, through my parents, in terms of what was going on, that I understood that this wasn't really something I could join aside and fix. It's that thing
Now,
when you
that's
see.
interesting. Join aside and fix. I never thought of it in those terms.
That's how you hear it with other people in my
Yeah.
scenario. They think if I could just join the right side and kind of smash this conflict, you treat it as watching two men in a fight in a bar, and your first thought is, well, I got to stop this, so I'll hit one and stop the other. And what you've done actually is just made three fighters, and that's kind of what
Correct.
it's like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Amazing. So your parents, what were they doing there in the first place, apart from the fact your dad came from there?
Yeah, so my dad is Lebanese. So he does light and sound conducting. So stages for weddings, filming, anything.
So all of these things were continuing, even though there was conflict all around you.
Oh yeah, the best thing about Lebanese, and I can say this as on behalf of all of them, is we find a way to keep going. It's incredible. If you've seen the news recently with the explosion in August, just the level of human energy that can go through what people do to keep going. It's amazing to me.
The pictures we were seeing of that were just horrific, really.
Right.
You know, the bride being, I mean, permanently in your brain, the bride basically being blown away with the...
Yeah, it damaged
aftermath.
some of the windows on our old house because we used to live in the
really?
city. Yeah, so it's my grandma's house, which I lived in later. And it's...
So you still have family back in Lebanon?
So yeah, my father and my grandmother are still there.
Does that bother you? Do you have sort of a fear for them and their futures?
I do, and it's a sense of you always fear that something's going to happen to your parents. Anyone can feel that, but
I guess
it's being able to do enough before that happens.
Yeah.
You will eventually lose your parents. The
It's
goal
to
is
love
to make
enough.
it
It's to love enough. Yes.
to
I
make it
understand.
worth it, and that's my goal.
John, thank you so much for sharing this with us. I found this a fascinating story because it's a story we don't actually hear. We don't hear of someone who's been there and come back and adjusting to this life, but it's not that much adjustment for you. But in fact, your story is quite unique, I feel.
Well, thank you.
No, it's been a pleasure to meet you. And we'll be back in just a tick, and we're talking about painting Stobie poles. Welcome back to Our Time. Unique and common throughout South Australia, the ugliness of Stobie poles is periodically denounced as also the mortal damage which they can cause and inflict on occupants of any vehicle unlucky enough to strike one at speed. An engineering solution to the state's lack of tall, termite-resistant hardwood for poles to carry power and telephone wires, the poles were designed by James Cyril Stobie, who joined the Adelaide Electric Supply Company in 1916 at the age of 21. So how do we make them look better? Call Tracey Davis! Hello.
Hello, Malcolm.
It's nice that we match time
It
here.
is. Yeah.
Tracey, you're an artist, obviously, among many other things. But I was so impressed seeing some of your artwork and also the engagement with community that you've done. What got you into painting Stobie poles?
I'd always wanted to do it in my local neighbourhood, and I was studying illustration at UniSA
Right.
in the city, and I just needed a canvas, I think, to go and work with.
So you decided on concrete and metal.
Well, I think I like interacting with people. I've done a lot of improv in the past as well.
Right.
And I think I'm not really wanting to paint and draw in my room by myself. So
No, I get that.
I kind of like the performative aspect of Stobie.
Well, I love this first shot of you next to the Stobie pole because it's just the perfect you with your red and pattern top on next to Little Red Riding Hood.
Yeah.
That's who it is, isn't it?
It sure is.
Little Red. Now, Stobie poles sort of pop up everywhere. Oh, I know what this is. Perhaps you could explain.
It's a Dalek.
It is.
Exterminate.
And this is very obvious.
The Phantom.
Why isn't there more Phantom around, I'd say? Now, this composite shot, this was a community effort, was it?
It was Golden Grove Primary School. They came down to our suburb of Kilkenny, as they don't really have Stobie poles in Golden Grove. I think
It's all underground, isn't it?
So they came down to do a tour of our area. As some of the girls that go to that school, their grandfather is a historian in my area,
Right.
and he went up and did a talk on mural and street art up there because they've also done a photo or a big mural of him in my area. So the primary school ended up coming down and I said, well, why don't you paint some boards? And they ended up painting poles and we've stuck them up in our area.
Brilliant. Oh, what a great idea.
And this one's actually, a friend of mine started a group called 2030 Species, and it's located in Hectorville. It's funded by the city of Campbelltown, and it's actually where she's gotten a whole heap of artists from the Campbelltown Art House to paint Stobie poles with native animals and birds.
Oh, that's great. I love this one.
Yeah, it's a koala. To try and draw, attention to people and about nature and how we need to help it and regenerate it at the moment.
And this is koalas going psychic?
It's a koala and a possum down below.
Oh, it's
and
a possum,
yeah,
yes, cool.
It's on a rainbow eucalyptus tree
Of course it is.
bark.
And I thought they'd just been a bit...
Yes.
I like this one.
Yeah, it's very Banksy in its sort of styling. And the
It is very Banksy.
It is very Banksy. I worked with Forbes Primary School over in Plimpton Park, and this was one of the images that she had that she actually wanted to do. So I worked with the kids. I did the initial outlines. They did the painting in, and then I tidied them up.
Oh.
So, and that's where the keyboard comes from as well.
Ba-bum, ba-bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, it's a rainbow keyboard.
Oh, yes, fantastic. Now, how did she get painted beside the Stobie pole?
So this was the resident, and she wanted to have port power colours, and you're not meant to paint sort of logos and things like that, though I do see a lot of port power poles in my area because I live in the West. And I just did this design for her. I thought it was really simplistic, and it was in the colours of port power, and she was
You didn't
wrapped.
also paint the lines?
No, I didn't paint the line, but it's a beautiful line,
It is
isn't
lovely, isn't it?
So, yeah.
And this one is the first one that we saw.
Yes. That's Little Red Riding Hood. I actually painted it next to a little park that we've got in our area because, you know, the whole story of Red Riding Hood, she's there to kind of warn children. And I thought maybe that was
Oh, fantastic.
strange.
It's legal to paint Stobie poles, I suppose.
It is. You do need to get permission from SA Power.
Yes, so that was the next question. How do you go about it?
You just need to contact them and then ask for permission.
So I've got a Stobie pole I don't like the look of. I'd like to paint it red, or I want an artist to come and paint it. What are the restrictions? Do you know?
Most people, so the only thing you can't really put on there is something offensive. So something that might be religious or defame other people.
Right.
Or if it's, something that might be naked or something like that might offend others. So you have to...
Well, the pole is naked
Yes.
to start with.
It is.
You could put clothes on, I suppose. I've
Actually,
actually
you
seen
could.
some absolutely beautiful paintings on Stobie poles in my area. But you do a lot of other things as well as paint Stobie poles, obviously. And we were talking about your improv work.
I haven't done... mainly we've been doing children's theatre in past years.
This is you and...
Eugene, my partner Eugene. So, and
who's sitting over there.
Who's
Who's
sitting
actually
over
been
there.
on the program before, quite a long
has.
time ago,
yes,
when he was part of the Cabaret Fringe organisation.
yes,
Oh, I have such a memory. Sometimes I frighten myself.
that's great.
Where do you feel your art is going, though? Do you feel that you want to do public art that people can appreciate, or where do you feel it's going for you?
It's probably a good question. Being outside in the weather, I mean, you get a real glare from Stobie pole painting. So it is hard sometimes. You've got the rain, you've got the sun. I kind of do it because I just enjoy it, really, when it comes to Stobie pole art. I occasionally get paid to do little jobs for people as well.
Well, when you think of it, you turn into your drive at home when you come home at night or whenever, and if you've got something that's really familiar, that's your sort of check-in point at home, it's such a lovely idea, particularly if it's something that you like. And whilst I appreciate you could do it yourself, it is always good to have a professional come in and, design something for you and, well, there it is.
Oh, definitely. And most people know somebody who has art skills. But also a lot of people actually are more capable than what they realise, but they're inclined to be a bit scared of actually getting out there and doing it themselves. They don't want it to look bad. Children, on the other hand, have no fear. They just kind of go out there and they're splashing away.
Well, I guess this is another important point. What sort of paint do you use? Is there something that's better than something else, or is it any old house paint?
External acrylic is... just house paint basically because it will last, and you need like good quality paint like Dulux or something that will have good pigmentation because the sun is quite bright out there and it will really attack the paintwork.
So you need to just check it's a sun resistant paint that you're using.
Yes.
So do you need to undercoat it first? Do you need to fill
Yes.
up the gaps in the concrete, or does that make it give it texture?
I know some people who actually like to work with the cracks or the holes and try and sort of make that part of the artistic design. You could if you wanted to. I guess, look, art is, we all like different style of art. So what you might like, somebody else may not like. Art is very subjective. So I think it's a case of just embracing the pole and doing something from your heart that you
Embracing the
like.
pole. Hello, Paul. So how long do they generally last? It's not a permanent forever, because I imagine that weather conditions would, over time sort of disintegrate the outline, the paint itself.
Well, a woman called Anne Newmarch, and there's the Newmarch Gallery at Prospect. She's actually started the whole pole painting craze in 1986. And there are some old poles by her and also High Marsh Greening in our area. And look, some of them are 20 or 30 years old.
Oh, really?
And they've faded, but they can still, I think they still look beautiful in their own way.
Is it a matter, though, that the artist could retouch it again to bring it back to life, or does that age sort of add to its charm?
I think the age can add to its charm sometimes. I know that with some of Anne Newmarch's work, they've actually put it into a gallery somewhere in the Prospect area. So they have some of the old poles and they have sort of put them on display.
What happens when a Stobie pole dies? It's an old pole, gets cut up and put in an art gallery. Goodness.
Yes.
What will they think of next?
That's for sure.
What will you think of next? Are you looking at other canvases, so to speak, to paint on?
I have kind of spread out. I also do a bit of chalk art. People sort of ask me to do chalk art. I quite often do things at Goodwood Road for them. I've done a lot of chalk art work with kids where it's a lot of fun.
Do you keep a record of that? Do you sort of take photos of that to say, well, I did that because it will have not lasted for all that long, I would imagine.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure.
So that's the sad thing about art, though, when you create art in a non-lasting medium, I suppose, that how do you remember what you've done? I've seen some great art in different parts of the world where people are doing it and people are standing around and throwing money in a hat or whatever, but overnight it's probably gone if it's rained or...
Fixative is actually pretty good, and like hairspray, if it's on a wall or something like that, you can actually make it stay there for quite a while, to be honest with you.
I suppose it's a bit like when I was younger, I did a lot of charcoal and chalk drawings, and they were sort of the same. But when you say hairspray, I've just realised we did spray fixative over it, but in those days there weren't the spray cans, so there was a thing that you'd blow like that to get the fixative on. Was that just hairspray?
Well, hairsprays are similar.
Something similar.
Yeah, it's something very similar. I've had some work stay up on walls in Goodwood for a good 6 months or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Congratulations. It's really nice to talk to somebody doing something that's community-minded, that gives us all a boost in life.
It's meant to make people smile.
I'm smiling, and we'll be back with our two guests to say goodbye in just a moment. And welcome back to OurTime. John Masri and Tracey Davis have been our special guests, completely different stories. Right. John, have you got some wisdom from your life so far, particularly being brought up in a war-torn country?
I think essentially it's just about kind of taking the experiences and the energy of what's happened around you and kind of transmuting it into something else. If you can make it positive, that would be great. But otherwise, make it go somewhere besides resting in you. And I think that can really help.
Do you think this will come out in your future, in your media exploits?
I believe so, and at least I plan to.
Fantastic, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
Tracey, the same question for you, I guess.
So Stobie pole painting is a great way to meet your neighbours, to make connections, to touch their hearts and to bring joy to the world, I think.
What a great way to end the show. So there's two wonderful examples of people who have done something in their life or been through something in their life that's meant something. So in the future, if somebody's got a Stobie pole and you don't like it, you think it's ugly, do something about it. Lucky if you live in the other states where you don't have Stobie poles, you have dead trees. You could do something with that too. And watch out for John's name, maybe in a movie somewhere near you.
Who knows?
Who knows? Good luck to both of you for the future. And thank you for joining us for this episode of OurTime. Wonderful people once again to talk with. And it's great to have had your company. So until we meet again, keep yourself nice till then. We'll see you soon.